record yet, so there we go. Those absent will miss all this beautiful intro, but all right, so chapter 7 is all about drawing your own conclusions. Okay, so I'm just going to read the first page since we're playing catch up a little bit here. So we all act on evidence that we're sure in the moment is accurate, but things don't always turn out the way we thought they would. Or even worse, sometimes situations turn out the same worn-out, predictable, and boring way over and over again. The point is that our conclusions about what's happening around us affect how we act, so we want to operate from conclusions that allow our actions to be effective, maybe even luminous. So I want to point out here, we want to operate from conclusions that allow our actions to be effective. Okay, so as we look at conclusions, we're going to shift the way that we often think about conclusions. So a lot of times we think about a conclusion as something that we arrive at after we've gathered evidence. You know, we get a bunch of evidence and we look at it objectively and arrive at a conclusion. Right? It's usually the end result as we look at it, right? But in this model, and if you look at the 4-box model, we can skip to on page that. On page 103, the 4-box model, you see we start in the upper left with the conclusion. And from that conclusion, we gather evidence to support our conclusion. This is just how our brain works. We all have conclusions. Often we will assess a situation and within seconds come up with a conclusion. And then our brains are hardwired to gather evidence for that conclusion. And then we gather the evidence, we build up a strong case for this conclusion that we're starting with, and then in box 3, it affects how we show up in any situation based on the conclusion we are holding and all the evidence we have to support it. It affects how we show up, how we act. And how we show up and act affects how others show up and act around us in our presence. It affects the result in physical reality. And then that, in turn, usually just confirms our original conclusion. So I'll give you the classic, my boss is a jerk example of this. So, you know, and Maria lays this out in the chapter. But it goes like this. I have a conclusion that my boss is a jerk, just an asshole. And I might come to one of you to commiserate and say, you know what, my boss is just a jerk. And you might say, well, maybe they're just having, a bad couple days, like there's a lot of stuff going on around the office. I'm like, no, trust me. Trust me, he's just a jerk. And then I would proceed to give you all of my evidence that I've been gathering about why my boss was a jerk. And I would give you, if I was holding that conclusion, I would give you some really convincing, compelling evidence. Right? This is to me, this is the truth. And I have some great stories that really just objectively back up and prove that he's a jerk. Right? And you might say, well, are you sure? And immediately I would, go on the defense. Yeah, definitely. Trust me. And so then let's say the boss walks in during this conversation. How might I act when the boss walks in? Would I be happy to see this jerk?
No.
No, I might give some kind of, my body language would show that, I might give him kind of a look. And, this guy's going to pick up on that, and he might walk out of the room, or he might kind of give me an uncomfortable look back, thus proving that he is a jerk, right? And then I might give you the kind of like, see, told you, it's the kind of shit I'm dealing with, right? And then, therefore, my conclusion has been proven. My boss is a jerk, right? And we do this with anything, with any conclusion that we hold. This is the way it works. And you might try to change the conclusion by proving the opposite or giving some kind of conditions. I might say, fine, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. No matter what my boss does today, I'm not going to let it get to me. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be, flexible, and no matter what he says or does, I'm not going to let it get to me, and I'm going to be, the bigger man here. And that'll work for maybe an hour or so until something happens that just spins me back to drawing more and more evidence. And then it's all doubly proven because I gave him the benefit. I made the effort. I gave him the benefit of the doubt, right? And you see that in that saying, no matter what they say, I'm not going to let it get to me. You can see that buried in there is the same conclusion. No matter what jerky things that jerk does says with his jerk face, I'm going to pretend it doesn't bother me, right? So that doesn't work. So the thing that we do is we need to find another conclusion that we can put in that box 1 to change the cycle. So what are your thoughts on this? Does this make sense? Does any of this sound familiar? Can you think of an example where you might have held a conclusion and been gathering evidence for it?
Yes. Do we have to, is the idea to substitute another conclusion or to not start with a conclusion?
It is to substitute another conclusion because our brains can't function without conclusions.
Okay.
We need these are structures of knowing that we need in order to make sense of the world. I have a conclusion that, when I see a chair and it's got 4 legs and a back, that I can sit down on it and, and rest, and it'll function as I see a chair functioning, right? That's a very mundane example, but it's a conclusion. We all have conclusions. The idea is to shift the conclusion, and I'll give you an example. And we're going to look more at about what conclusions work and what don't. So the counter example here is Mother Teresa. Now, she famously said that everyone who she met, she saw as Christ himself. So that was the conclusion that she had when she interacted with anyone. And so think of the evidence that she gathered. What happens is you filter out, we have so much information coming at us all the time that we filter it in different ways. And our brains are made to filter out the information that doesn't support our conclusions. So any negative parts about a person, are kind of dulled, filtered out. Now, this isn't about excusing bad behavior. This isn't like this person did this shitty thing and I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. Okay, because that's that's not helpful. That's not what we're talking about. But what we're talking about is, regardless of what a person says or does, what do we see about them to be true?
Regardless of what a person says or does, what do you see about them that is true?
Yeah, what do we see to be true about this person? And in the next chapter, we're going to get more into that. Ways to what we can hold in our focus so that we show up in an empowering way for people, because we've learned, we have the tools, life's intentions, and standards of integrity to see who we really are, so that we can call forth on our greatest self in the situation. And to really be successful on your hero's journey, it's equally important that we practice seeing that in others as well. So one thing that you can shift a conclusion to when you're talking about another person is that person, whether they know it or not, has life's intentions, and that person has their own standards of integrity. And if you hold that as your conclusion, then you start gathering evidence. Oh, look at them demonstrating being kind. Look at them demonstrating being creative. So another point about this is that this isn't about changing your thoughts or trying not to think your thoughts. The truth is we have thousands of thoughts all the time, and trying to change them doesn't really work, right? Have you ever tried to change or stop thinking a thought? It just doesn't work. Notice a thought take a minute, notice thoughts that just come across your brain, and then pick one. Just pick a random thought in your brain, and then once you have it, try to not think it. It doesn't work like that. So you're going to have your thoughts. The point is, what do you focus on? So I'm going to read a little more from this chapter on why you don't have to change your thoughts, even if you could. So
What page?
This is page 101. Why you don't have to change your thoughts, even if you could. So first, is your brain busy? Try to make a tick mark for every thought you have in a 2-minute period, and you'll be astounded at how many of them pass in front of you like clouds before the sun on a windy day. It's an endless parade. If you've ever tried to change your thoughts, it could drive you crazy. How could you stop each thought marching in the parade long enough to change it? Think of the energy expenditure. You'd soon be exhausted and frustrated. And I can see the fog rolling in just thinking about this futile process. Does anyone want to read the next paragraph?
You might say that instead of changing your thoughts, you simply won't think them. Good luck. This is equally difficult because your brain basically doesn't understand the word don't. To return to the example from chapter 2, for the next 10 seconds, try not to think about a hot fudge sundae with nuts and whipped cream. Go ahead. Don't think about it. What happens? You guessed it. Rows of hot fudge sundaes parade through your head.
David, do you want to read the next paragraph?
Sure.
Thank you.
This aspect of brain function, focusing upon the subject, even when it's preceded by a don't or not, is well understood by therapists who use hypnosis. For example, look at the following two phrases and pick the one that would most clearly produce the intended result. 1, don't forget to take your car keys when you leave. 2, remember to take your car keys when you leave. It's obvious, isn't it? The first suggestion puts forget to take your keys into your mind. The second, remember to take your keys, easier for the brain to follow and therefore more apt to influence your behavior in the desired manner.
Great. Thank you. So that makes sense, right? It's like, you can't change your thoughts. And even if you could, it doesn't really work that way. So what you focus on can influence, which thoughts have energy for you, and your conclusions are kind of the beginning of that process. They're the framework. Let's see. So if we skip down to the bottom here, it becomes clear that we all gather evidence to support the conclusions that interest us. What's more, not everyone sees a situation in the same way, even when presented the same objective facts. And not only does not everyone see a situation in the same way, everyone sees the situation completely differently, given the same facts. One place this becomes obvious is when listening to different members talk about the same family. Take Jim, for example. We were talking about the 4-box paradigm in a seminar, and he came up with the following. Sometimes I think my brothers and I were born in different families. I mean that we don't see things the same way when we talk about our parents. My brother Pete is convinced that Dad would argue at the dinner table and discourage anyone from answering back. My memory is that he was trying to teach us how to debate issues. In fact, that's why I think I did so well on the debate team in college. So, depending on what lens you're looking through, what conclusion you have, you are going to interpret the same facts in a completely different way as the person next to you with a different conclusion. And that is going to determine how you show up. Even if you try, like we talked about the boss is a jerk thing. I know my boss is a jerk, but I'm going to, no matter what he does, I'm going to not let it get to me and show up in a way as if he wasn't a jerk. That just doesn't work. Because our behavior is so subtly affected in ways that we just can't control based on the thoughts that we are focusing on. So I'll give you an example outside of the book. There was an episode of, I think, Radio Lab, the podcast, and they started off with this experiment they did with mice. And they had two sets of mice, two groups of mice in cages. And they were all the same basic generic lab mouse, typical lab mouse, and they had one group in one cage and one group in another cage. And they had the cages labeled. So one of them was labeled that these were mice with very high IQ, smart mice. And then the other one was labeled, these mice have very low IQ. These are the dumb mice. And of course, the mice were all the same. They were just average mice, but they were labeled that way. And then they had researchers who didn't know anything about what the experiment was, just run a series of tests of these mice. And what happened was the mice that were labeled smart mice performed dramatically better, like 50% better performance than the ones labeled dumb mice. And these are professional researchers, lab technicians. They're not like abusing the dumb mice. They're just, in their mind, they are running the exact same experiments in the exact same way. And such a subtle difference in their conclusion of this is a smart mouse affected their behavior in a way that directly influenced how the mouse behaved in kind. So if we think that we can hold a conclusion and just will ourselves to act in a way that doesn't reflect it, it's just not how it works. So, any questions? What are you all seeing about this?
Well, I mean, I'm just clinically relating it to pathologizing symptoms, and you give a diagnosis or a label, or in general, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy to it, conditioning you into identifying with it to a point. I mean, but there is, importance of diagnostic of labeling and pathology, but I think it's limiting to say the label.
Yeah. But again, sorry to interrupt. But again, just to point out, we can't just give up having conclusions altogether.
Yeah.
Sorry, David, what were you going to say?
No, we can't give up. Yeah.
That's our roadmap. I mean, that's really with our standards and rights.
It seemed like the conclusions in that example with the mice, the conclusions were already laid out. They hadn't, the lab technicians hadn't formed conclusions about the mice. They were given conclusions.
Yeah.
By way of labeling, and it still affected their behavior. So it's almost, so it just sort of makes you wonder about, how many conclusions do we actually generate ourselves versus inherit, or just buy into because of a label, or because of someone else's opinion, or because of something that we because of a sign that is very, very superficial. Is that relevant?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to notice that most of our conclusions that we have, like you said, haven't been chosen by us.
Okay.
And we don't even necessarily see that we have conclusions about things. We think that we're just going about gathering evidence objectively and, acting rationally. And most people go through life unaware of the conclusions that they're gathering evidence toward, and certainly not intentionally picking them. A lot of them are arbitrary. Some of them are given to us. Some of them are just what we are making up about something because we need to make up something. Mm-hmm. Right? Without conclusions, it's very disorienting. I'll read this section on that. The human brain is, in fact, wired for conclusions, even from a perceptual point of view. When you can't draw conclusions, it is disorienting. To show you what I mean, imagine the following. You are in a room, and wherever you look, on the floor, ceiling, and walls, all you see is the kind of visual snow or static you get from a television with no reception. You hear no noise, the lights aren't glaring, just the static wherever you direct your gaze. How long could you last in that room? You're facing no obvious threat, but your inability to draw perceptual conclusions, or gestalts, as they're called in perceptual psychology, could make you very agitated. So we need these conclusions to be oriented, you know? And so a lot of them are just what your brain is making up so that we can get around and live our lives. And what we are learning is how to begin to observe our conclusions, decide for ourselves if this conclusion is serving us and those around us, or if it is holding us back, and then having the choice to shift to an ontological conclusion. And we'll look at some examples of that so that we can start gathering evidence and showing up in a way that we choose. That's the skill, that's the new skill, and a lot of people will go through life just acting on the conclusions that their brain arbitrarily made up in the moment. A conclusion is like a reflex. It takes very little to set one off. Once it's triggered, the brain only looks for evidence that will validate that conclusion. Therefore, our evidence is automatically and predominantly determined by the triggered conclusion, not the other way around. So it's just like a reflex. We come into a situation, bam, conclusion. Okay, I got the conclusion. Where's the evidence to make sense of this conclusion? Dave Roth, what are you noticing about any of this?
I don't know, just general truths. I mean, I completely agree with that. And it's something I try to avoid, but I don't know, doesn't really work that well. It's like as soon as I have a perspective, it's really hard to change it from like what it is. Like, I don't know, I'm gonna even like noticing specifically that you're being entirely biased, it's really hard to get away from. That's what I was just thinking about now.
Yeah. Oh, great observation. It is, and part of that is that there are ways to shift your conclusion that are effective, and even those take practice to master, for sure. And then there's other ways that just simply won't work. So one example is if you have a conclusion and then you try to gather evidence to the opposite. So going back to my boss is a jerk, okay? Let's say I you know what? I just realized that I've been gathering evidence for this conclusion that my boss is a jerk, and I am showing up as closed-minded and shut off and passive-aggressive, and that just sucks. So you know what? My boss is not a jerk. I'm going to gather all the evidence I can that my boss is not a jerk. So you're gathering evidence for the opposite, okay? And that is actually the same. That's going to have the same result as gathering evidence for it. You're just building up a counter case, and you're just basically you're challenging your monkey mind. Like, look, see, he's not a jerk here, right? Where that other part of your brain is like, oh yeah, well, this and this and this. And then, so that's one thing that doesn't work. Once you see that a conclusion is not serving you, it doesn't work to change the conclusion to just put not in front of it. Boss is not a jerk. There, done. Doesn't work. Another thing would be, let's say I'm operating on the conclusion that I don't have enough money. I'm not going to make enough money. And, I'm struggling financially, right? And I'm gathering evidence for that. And not only do you gather evidence, sometimes you create the evidence in how you act, right? So I say, oh, shit, I've been gathering evidence that I'm not making enough money or not going to make enough money. I'm gathering evidence that I'm financially unsuccessful. And that's the result I'm getting. So I need to change that. So let's see, I'm going to pick a new conclusion that is, I have all the money in the world, or I have all the money I could possibly want. And, I already am rich and making money is easy. I'm going to gather evidence for that, and then that's going to be the result, and it's going to be great. Well, that's nice, but I just made a bunch of shit up. And you can't just make a bunch of shit up and gather evidence for it and see the results. So if you can't get rid of the conclusion altogether, you can't just go about with no conclusion, and you can't shift to the conclusions that's the opposite of the one that you see isn't serving you. And you can't just make a bunch of shit up and have that be your conclusion. What conclusions can you shift to? Well, the answer is an ontological conclusion that's an affirmation that is true. So examples, you already have your life's intentions, being willing, your standards of integrity. And we'll look at some more affirmations that you can hold for another person. So if I shifted to, in this last example about money, I am willing to be financially successful as my conclusion. Well, that is true. That's not making a bunch of shit up about I already have all the money that I could possibly want, but it is true that I am willing. And in that, I can gather evidence of me being financially successful. And remember, success as we define it here is doing what you said you would do consistently with clarity, focus, ease, and grace. So I would gather evidence, oh, look, I just saved this money here. Oh, look, I paid my rent on time. All of these things demonstrating being financially successful. Oh, look, I posted an ad on Craigslist looking for new clients. All of these actions, you start gathering evidence to support this, and you show up in that way. So that's the way to do it. So a lot of us, myself included, have tried the other ways, and it's frustrating because it just doesn't work. Make sense?
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. It is 8:03. I would say this is about good time to take a break. If y'all want, is there any other questions or final thoughts?
Is there a way, I don't know, is there like an analogy you can make of ontology or something? You've probably said that like 4 or 5 times now, and I've literally had it open since the last time you've said it.
Yep.
And every time you say it, I read the definition of it, but I can't remember it.
Great. So we'll actually, and we'll start the next chapter after the break, and we'll talk a little more in detail. But yeah, ontology is the study of being. So just compared to psychology, psychology is the study of our thoughts, feelings, and our worries, all that stuff. And ontology is the study of who we really are. A study of who we are as human beings. And so, yeah. So, for example, your life's intentions. Okay, I am willing to be.
Can you define metaphysics for me?
Yep, metaphysics is everything that exists outside of physical reality.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And so, for example, your life's intentions are part of who you are, and they don't change based on your fleeting thoughts and worries, and they don't change on constantly changing conditions in physical reality. They are who you are that is consistent, same as your standards of integrity, or rather that's a reflection of who you are. And in the next chapter, we'll look at how to extend that to seeing others for who they really are, regardless of what they think or say or do.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Cool. I want to just read one more thing about the 4 boxes, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. So on page 109 here, toward the bottom, Maria writes, I have now worked for a number of years with the 4 boxes and know that the following will shift us toward luminosity. So these are the following that will shift us. And this first one I find particularly powerful. If you want to change your behavior, don't concentrate on the behavior itself. I'm going to read that again because I think this is a powerful shift for me. If you want to change your behavior, don't concentrate on the behavior itself. Instead, shift the focus of your attention to a conclusion that interests you. And your behavior will naturally and effortlessly shift to conform to the new evidence that this conclusion generates. So to go back to, I'll use the couple examples that we're using to drive this point home. Hello, Peter.
Hey, Greg. How are you?
Hey, Pete.
I am great.
Hey, guys. Hola.
How are you doing?
Great.
Glad you make it.
Yeah.
Are there 3 Davids here? I see
Just
David,
2.
and I see another David.
I'm logged in twice. I have it on my computer so I can see it in my phone so you can see me.
Yep.
Cool.
So we were just talking about the 4-box model of conclusions, and I was reading a few more points, and then we were going to take our 5-minute break.
Okay.
Right on time, Pete.
So yeah. So if you want to change your behavior, don't concentrate on the behavior itself. Instead, shift the focus of your attention to a conclusion that interests you, and your behavior will naturally and effortlessly shift to conform to the new evidence that this conclusion generates. So in the example of my boss is a jerk, I see that I am showing up as closed-minded and shut off and agitated. I don't like that. If I try to focus on that behavior to change it, it's not going to work. Instead, I shift the conclusion to, let's say, I am willing to be an empowering coworker. Or I shift the conclusion about my boss. My boss has their own standards of integrity. And then my behavior, as I show up, will naturally and effortlessly shift. Doesn't that sound a lot easier than trying to force yourself to behave differently than how you have naturally been showing up? In the example of, we had the conclusion of, I'm not making enough money. Okay, well, shit, I just got to change and make more money. I just got to do that. Why isn't it working? Shit, there must be something wrong with me. Yada, 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 yada. Shifting the conclusion, I am willing to be financially successful, and the behavior naturally shifts as you gather evidence. Kind of like what David mentioned in the beginning, where he started gathering evidence for demonstrating his standard of integrity. Oh, look at all these other examples of when I have demonstrated this. And it naturally changes how you show up in a way that you don't have to force. So if you find yourself wanting to change your behavior and focusing really hard on that behavior itself, take a step back and remember this technique. Great. Let us take 5 and then
That's
dive.
hard work. I need a break.
Yeah. I could tell Pete was getting a little glass-eyed there. So we'll give him his coffee break. I'll see you all at 8:15.
Okay.
Yo.
Hello. All right. We are back.
What are you doing, David? Greg, you know what I bought?
What did you buy?
I bought 3x5 cards.
What's that?
I bought 3x5 cards.
Oh, sweet.
I haven't owned any of these in a while.
Yeah.
It's very
Sorry,
exciting.
what haven't you owned?
I have not owned 3x5 cards in quite a while.
Yeah.
Oh, those are invaluable.
100 of them.
I love them.
It's a lot
So
of
enough-
intentions.
Enough to just share with the class. Pass them around.
I just
Right.
bought 400 sticky notes. I don't even know what I'm going to do with them. Your guess is probably better than mine.
All right. So we are back. So let us start on page 117. Ontological conclusions lead to luminous experiences. So remember that you now have two methods for shifting the focus of your attention from one set of conclusions to another. Developing the capacity to observe rather than analyze, seeing that it is possible to be willing no matter what you think or feel. You also have two categories of ontological conclusions on which you may choose to focus: your life's intentions and your standards of integrity. And we talked a little bit before the break about how those conclusions are the ones that can really affect your evidence and behavior, as opposed to making stuff up or trying to prove wrong the conclusion you had in the first place. Would anyone like to read the next paragraph, starting with, "We are now going to put these..."
We are now going to put these all together to create luminous experiences. Let's begin by becoming even clearer about what we mean by ontology. Let's give the word vigor and presence. When you see into your ontological nature, you'll have the capacity to bring that aspect of yourself to bear upon everyday situations. And that's where luminosity lives, not in the rarefied atmosphere of metaphysical reality, but in the actions you take at work, in your community, and with those you love.
Great. So got it.
You know-
It's the actions that you take where the luminosity lives.
You could have just told me to wait, Greg.
What's that?
You could have just told me to wait. When I was like, what's ontology?
Well, yeah, we go a little deeper into it, but that's, the basic
But thank you.
definition.
I still appreciate it.
it. Who would like to read the next paragraph to recap just a bit?
Recap just a bit. Your life's intention and standards of integrity are your internal anchors. They belong to you no matter what you think or feel at any moment. In other words, your life's intentions and standards of integrity are not affected in the least by anything that goes on in your head. They speak to an aspect of you that transcends intellect and emotion. They reflect your personal brilliance. When you take action in accord with them, you are led to luminosity.
Isn't it a relief to know that your life's intentions and standards of integrity are not in the least bit affected by what's going on in your head?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, would anyone like to read the next paragraph? This is because who we truly are.
This is because who we truly are at the heart of our being is bigger than our thoughts, feelings, diagnoses, and labels. While we can't see directly into this heart of being, we can observe its reflection. One example of which are standards of integrity. Like the Caribbean fish in chapter 2, who saw water for the first time. Once you observe something, the knowledge of it is with you for life. You can't unobserve it. I have heard from many people that the power and energy of seeing their standards of integrity for the first time stays with them forever.
Great, thank you. So that's ontology, who we really are. And, as you read on, Maria talks about that we are not replacing psychology with ontology. We still have our psychological parts of who we are. We still have our thoughts and feelings, and that's good. That's part of the richness of our life experience. And so don't worry about trying to get rid of any of your psychological experience. Just know that there's also these ontological aspects of who you really are that can be your anchors, that are more consistent, that are like the sea below the waves, still and deep, where the waves are like all your thoughts kind of jumping out of it, chaotic at times. And I like this anecdote from an interview with Ram Dass, and it was on New Dimensions Radio, and he was asked, how are you different now than in your earlier life? And he said there was virtually no difference between how he is now and how he was as Richard Alpert, which is who he was before his spiritual transformation. He still has, he explained, the same reaction he always had. Being impatient, for example, while waiting in line at a movie theater. The difference is that these feelings don't last as long. I could tell that he discovered how not to be controlled by the unpleasant feeling, but to instead observe it and then shift his focus of attention to something else, something less aggravating, something more fundamentally of interest to him. Okay, so this is the skill that we're learning. Observe and shift. Observe the thoughts that we have, that we'll always have, and practice shifting to what's more interesting and what's more meaningful to us. That's the core of what we're doing. And it's a skill that we practice and we get better at. And so you see, as you master it, it's not that those negative thoughts go away. It's just that you become quicker and more skillful at shifting. There was this Aikido master, and he was asked, how do you stay in constant balance? It's incredible. You never lose your balance. He said, I lose my balance 1,000 times a minute. It's just that I can correct so quickly that you don't even notice.
That's good.
So that's what it's about. So, and here's the thing, if you think about balance and being focused on what's important to you, you will lose focus on it. You will get off of your life's intentions. It will happen again and again and again for the rest of your life. And to notice when it happens and simply shift back to what you want to focus on, the conclusions that you want to hold, and not make it mean a bunch of stuff that you lost focus on that.
Not make it mean a bunch of stuff that you lost focus on?
Yeah. So, for example, if you have a day and you say like, oh, I wasn't demonstrating my standards of integrity at all yesterday, And I totally lost focus on my life's intention that I wanted to demonstrate all day. Now you could say, that's interesting. Now let me shift my attention back to my life's intention and my standards of integrity. Or you could say, why the hell did I do that? What is wrong with me that I acted in this way that isn't reflective of my life's intention? Are these really my life's intentions? Is there something wrong with them? Did I pick the wrong ones? And on and on and on. You can make up a bunch of stuff, and the whole time you're doing that, you are not balanced. You are not getting back to focusing on what's important to you. And our monkey mind would have us do that ad nauseum so that we don't move forward. So that's what I mean by make a bunch of stuff up. Make it mean a bunch of things that we lost focus, where in truth it happens to everyone. And mastery is just noticing it quicker and being able to shift back with ease. That makes sense? We talked about Mother Teresa earlier. And in an interview, she said that early on she discovered that she had a Hitler inside of her, meaning that she had dark, negative thoughts like the rest of us. And so, what would it mean to discover that ontologically, who we really are is no different than Mother Teresa, and that the only difference is what she was focusing on, what conclusions she was holding. That she was not, like Ram Dass, not free of any of these negative or disruptive psychological thoughts that we all have. It's just that they were masters at focusing on what had meaning. So let's turn to page 120. We talked a little bit about, we have learned to focus on our own life's intentions and standards of integrity, bring the best out in ourselves, but our hero's path requires that we learn to see it in others as well. Unlike the process of obsessing about or analyzing our thoughts and feelings, this process, observing and shifting, transforms your life in a gentle, natural way. You live with ease instead of struggle. In other words, luminosity. Another way to grasp this is to think about a beautiful woven Indian basket. It is spacious. As you look inside, you see a variety of fruits. Some are bright and smell sweet. Some look either unripe or smell bitter. You look inside and, observing all of them, pick the ones you wish to eat. The not so appealing fruit is still there, but you don't have to pick it up. So you will still have your thoughts that don't serve you, but you don't have to think them. You don't have to pick them up. Your ontological self is a bit like that basket. It's that aspect of you that witnesses and contains all the fruits of your life. You bring it forth every time you begin to observe rather than analyze what's going on within and around you, including your monkey mind symptoms, if they are present. Every time you become willing to proceed, no matter what monkey mind says. You listen instead to your gentle voice of wisdom. Focus on your standards of integrity and how to put them in physical reality. And focus on your life's intentions and how to put them into physical reality. And whenever you're doing this, you're bringing forth your true hero's heart, your true nature. So on the next page, we have a list of psychological and ontological questions. So these questions are a great way to practice shifting our attention. So let's read through these. Let's read three at a time. I'll read the first three and then we'll go through them. So that's first, on the left hand, we have psychology questions. And on the right hand, we have ontology questions. So number 1, psychology. What are my worries, doubts, fears, and concerns? The ontological question, what really matters to me in life? Number 2, why is this happening? Why am I feeling this way? Or how might what I'm going through contribute to the lives of others? I love that one, right? Because we've all had that thought, you're having a shitty day and something happened that just sucks. You're not having any fun. And it's natural to say, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? Why am I feeling this way? And what if you were to ask, how might what I'm going through right now contribute to the lives of others? Notice the shift in just asking that question. Number 3, what is my history? Or what am I grateful for right here and now? Peter, would you like to read the next 3?
Sure. What are the dynamics, motives, family patterns affecting me?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you.
So number 4, psychology. What are the dynamics, motives, family patterns affecting me? Ontology. What are my lessons? How will they help me grow?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Number 5, psychology. What should I work on? Ontology. What is here for me to explore? Number 6, psychology. Do I really need help? Shouldn't I learn to do this on my own? Ontology. Am I inviting and allowing others to support me?
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And as we read through these, just take a note on the psychology questions, which ones sound most familiar? Because these are all very common questions we ask ourselves. Rainer, would you mind reading 7 through 9?
Psychology, how can I get my needs met? Ontology, what might I do to benefit the whole? Number 8, psychology, where have I stopped myself? Why have I done this? Ontology, what is a game worth playing and goals worth playing for? 9, psychology, what needs to be fixed here? Ontology, murder.
Great. David Roth, do you have the book yet?
I do not.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. David, would you like to read the next 3? Thank you.
Sure. Psychology. How can I become more comfortable? Ontology. How might I wake up and lift the fog? Psychology. How might I do the things I need to do quickly and efficiently? Ontology. How might I do what's before me with clarity, focus, ease, and grace? Psychology. What do I want to do? Ontology. What am I willing to do?
Great. So just notice which psychological questions seem most familiar. And remember that we don't need to change our thoughts. So you don't need to notice this is familiar and then how do I change it? But, you have this alternative. Okay, that thought's there. How about this new one? So what are you noticing looking at this list? Does anything seem particularly familiar? Do you notice a shift as you read the ontological question next to the psychological question? And how might your behavior, how might you show up differently if you were asking the questions on the right?
I guess personally, the questions, the ontological questions, are very familiar. But the psychological is a lot more of like how I've actually been, and I don't know. I feel like it'll be really hard to shift back to like an ontological perspective.
Great. Hard in what way? What would be hard about shifting your attention to the ontological questions?
I guess it's like it's been a while that they've been on the other side of it, so it's, I don't know, it's like it's almost ingrained in a way, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you said that, David, because it reminds me of the metaphor of the cow path through the grass. And so our brains are very malleable. They're very changeable throughout our whole lives. And it is true that the thoughts that seem very familiar, and you can notice if your behavior reflects a thought, then you are focusing on that, whether you're conscious of it or not. And the longer we do it, the more those synapses kind of develop like a groove-like path in our brain. And so it takes some effort and is less comfortable to go a new path, right? These are the familiar paths. Even if they're not comfortable in their own way, even if you're suffering from them, they're still familiar. And it's like the cows will keep following that path because the grass is trampled down. It's well established. But as you train yourself to think the new thoughts, and it can be as simple as looking at these questions, for a minute each day, and not trying to make overnight blaze a new trail, but just start patting down that grass. What happens is it becomes easier, it becomes more habitual to think these thoughts. And then actually the grass on the old cow path starts to actually get overgrown because you're not using it as much. So this is right. Physiologically, this is how our brains work. Not that there are literally little cows in our brains, but our thoughts form habits, but they are not permanent. They are changeable, and it can take a small practice of focus to start to change those. So it would be hard to all at once shift to a whole new perspective.
Yeah.
But we are always looking for small, sweet steps, not the whole massive transformation overnight. Great. Anyone else? I'm looking at these questions. What might shift if you were asking the ontological questions? What do you notice about them?
more active. They are they have a component of initiative, right? What am I
Yeah.
going to do? And that's also a good habit, I think, because we tend to. I'm assuming that's a corollary that if our thoughts are becoming more habitually ontological, then our action will follow more. Action will follow more fluidly than if we're thinking in the left column.
Yeah.
More parallelizing.
You got it. 100%. That's it. The questions on the left will not move us forward. They'll keep us where we are. And you're absolutely right. Questions on the right will lead to fluid, natural action. And remember, if you want to change your behavior, don't focus on the behavior. Focus on a new conclusion, or in this case, a new question to look for possibility. Yeah. Very good. Anyone else?
Well, they're really hearkening back to those life's intentions. They're sort of reflecting back towards those, especially a question like what I'm going through contribute to the lives of others. If your life's intentions had to do with being a good friend or being a good community member or a good person in a relationship, that would send you right. You'd be working, I guess you would say, in a ontological way. You would say you'd kind of be working from that life's intention.
Yeah.
Kind of like sending you backwards to go forwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. All right. Yeah, you got it. So we are going to do one more exercise about how do you see somebody else ontologically. Up until now, most of this has been focused on observing ourselves, our own thoughts. But how do you see someone else with an ontological lens? And remember, what conclusions can you hold that are true, that are affirmations, not making something up or trying to prove wrong the conclusion that you had. So a lens of this person will do nothing wrong. This person's actions are all generous and nice. This person is going to help me whenever they can. All of these conclusions are shit that I'm making up, right? So in order to be present to who people really are, we ask a series of ontological questions that make up the ontological lens, which is also known as the green lens. So I'm gonna read two sets of conclusions. The first one is from a psychological perspective. These are all natural questions or natural conclusions you could hold about someone if you were looking at them psychologically. And then the second one will be a set of ontological conclusions. So I want you to pick someone in your life. And in the book they say a loved one, but I say pick anyone in your life. It could be a coworker, somebody that you know. Could be a spouse, a coworker, a friend, anyone in your life. Just pick them and picture them before you, and actually close your eyes and just picture them like they're right in front of you. All right. We all have someone? Great. So if you held the first psychological perspective, you could entertain at least 6 different conclusions about this person. And you could gather evidence. Remember, we gather evidence for our conclusions, not the other way around. You could gather evidence for the following. This person is damaged in some way and needs to be fixed. There is something wrong with them. Maybe not everything, but something is wrong. This person does not have their own answers. They're clueless about some aspect of their life. Not only are they driving in the fog, but even if the fog were to lift, they still wouldn't know what to do. I have the answers for this person, and it's up to me to fix them or give them good advice. This person doesn't have many goals or dreams worth playing for. I question this person's commitment, motivation, and ability. I feel that this person is a drain on me, taking up my energy or time. Notice your experience as you apply one or more of these 6 conclusions to the person you're focused on. Realize this is an artificial situation and it may be difficult, but try it anyway. Think about how you would begin to act around this person. Is there any room for possibility, creativity, collaboration, or support? Does your heart constrict somewhat? Just notice the reactions for yourself. We all have our own reactions when we view people through one or more of the above conclusions. And the point is to get in touch with your own version of the smog that rolls in when you see people in this way. So now let's look at 6 other conclusions that you could entertain about the person who you are picturing in front of you. You could gather evidence for the following. This person is a hero, whole and complete, just the way they are. This person has goals and dreams and a desire to make a difference. This person has loved ones, people they love and who love them. This person has standards of integrity and life's intentions, whether or not they know it at the time. This person makes a contribution to me in some way, right now. This person is worthy of being treated with dignity and respect in the way that I interact with them. Notice the shift in your energy as you apply one or more of these conclusions to the person who you're focusing on. You might notice your body relaxing in a sense that all is well. When I apply these conclusions, I also feel a sense of ease. I don't need to analyze, or fix, or change this person. A burden is lifted and luminosity draws nearer. So practice seeing people according to this second perspective, and you are opening your heart of compassion. There is a spaciousness and possibility here. You have adopted the ontological view. It is the result of seeing directly into the heart of who people really are. This is the way they and you are meant to be seen. So you can open your eyes, and so as you practice this, the practice is seeing people who they are, no matter what they say or do. Seeing that they are being a contribution to you in the moment, even if they're behaving badly. So what do you notice as we do this?
One thing,
There you go. There you go.
it almost feels like the ontological conclusion are more, the evidence, I think it'll be easier to find evidence.
I don't know. I'm struggling. There's this employee at work who I have to do corrective action for. She just disappears for lunch and doesn't come back for 2 hours. So when I do this, like I'm focused on that, but then when I'm like looking at it from an ontological point, the person is whole and complete. She does has dreams, but she needs to be on time to work. So it's hard because it's so frustrating. And I told her yesterday, I was like, I love the space that we hold for each other, but like, I really feel like it's taking advantage. And like, you can't go to Boston Market for 2 hours and then just not come back to work. So it's frustrating because it's like, yes, I see that, but then it's like, fuck, like, how do I like still think ontologically while being a manager? And,
Yeah. Well, what do you see about that?
I see that I don't know because she has to fulfill that, but I don't have to I could put down the objectives by still viewing her from an ontological point of view versus saying, wow, she's really irritating. She has poor time management. I could see the positivity of her showing up, of her being a hero because she is. And, it makes me want to work on the time management instead of be irritated.
Mm.
But it's still irritating.
Yeah. Yeah, good. It's still irritating.
Because I haven't been practicing this, it's like I'm still, it's hard to do sometimes, because it's comfortable to be irritated. It's like that gratifying.
Right.
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Even if the way we've been doing things is irritating us, it's still comfortable because it's the way we've been doing it. There's a comfort in the discomfort of it. Now, it is true that, if somebody is not showing up when they need to for work and you're the manager, that is something that you need to address. And this doesn't make that go away. And this is not positive thinking. This is not, when I see this person as someone who always shows up for work on time. But I mean, which one of these conclusions, is clashing with that? This person is a hero, whole and complete. They are on their hero's journey.
One lunch at a time.
One long bus ride. The conclusion that this person has their own standards of integrity might maybe initiate that conversation in a way that makes the person less, makes the person more open to trust and talking about what might be missing. So, for example, or what might be what they're not focusing on. So, I know you have standards of integrity. Tell me about them.
Well, no, don't do that. because
you can join the course next week.
She doesn't even know what you're talking about.
She doesn't know what I'm talking about, but
what you do is you enroll her in the next crash course.
No, kidding. But if she says no, one of my standards of integrity is to be, be a good team, team player. I don't know what it is, but you might be able to elicit some conflict between her behavior and her standard of integrity.
It's really not about her; it's about you. It's about us.
I know, but I'm just thinking in general. I just feel like The ontological piece is more active.
It's the
more
connection of
Right.
us to her. And
Right.
Yeah, well, here's the thing, is that you cannot predict or control another person's behavior. And it's about, Rainer, you're absolutely right. It's about you seeing that they have standards of integrity, not, oh, if they only knew their standards of integrity, they'd be on time for fucking work. Let me ask you this, Rainer, because we only have a couple minutes left, but this is good. Let me ask you this: have you had a conversation with her about being on time?
yes, and I mean, I come from a strengths place, so I always start it with everything she's done right. She comes from a very hero's heart. So I emphasize that, and I also see myself in her. And I think ontologically speaking, that's that connection. Like, I don't see her as her being as a lack of being like her, but I did. Like, I really took it out with her and said, like, I feel like you're taking advantage of my leniency, and
Yeah.
that was hard because, yeah. So, and I was analyzing that. I was definitely coming from a psychological place, and like, I think the differentiation there is important, and not what I want her to do, but what am I willing to do too to help her. I think getting to that point of, we're in this together, how can we, and what am I willing to do, what she's willing to do, but more so for me to be willing to focus on how it could be based on my standards of integrity and my life's intentions, which helps. But I wasn't there yesterday, to be honest.
Good. So you notice that.
Yeah.
So that's all that is, because then there's, because that's where the irritation is.
Yeah.
It's this person behaved in this way, and I let that be a reason to view them not for who they really are. Because the truth is that people are going to behave the way that they are going to behave, and seeing them through an ontological lens isn't going to guarantee that they behave any differently. It's likely that they'll show up in a different way if you're being this supportive presence to them, but it doesn't guarantee anything in their behavior. But if these conclusions are conditional on them, a person acting in a certain way, then there's something else that you are looking at in that moment. And so that's something to notice. But, I mean, great. Like, you see, oh, yes, this person was behaving in this way, and that wasn't okay, and I need to take action to correct it. And also I see in the moment I was being irritated and not seeing them as a hero, whole, and complete. And that's totally fine, because we didn't even do the ontological lens until tonight.
So I'm off the hook.
You're off the hook. Do it again. You're out to the curb. Okay. Anything else? It is 9:01. So, any other burning questions or reflections before we say goodnight? So on page 131, there's instructions for if you want to write down these ontological conclusions and carry them with you and use them throughout the week. So you can look at that. Next week, we will not have class. So we have 2 remaining. So those will be the 2 following Thursdays. Whatever those dates are, that would be the 16th and the 23rd. Chapters 9 and 10 for next week. And once again, if you haven't scheduled your first one-on-one session, now is the perfect time to do it. All right.
Sounds good.
All right.
Greg, good night, guys.
Great class, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Bye, y'all.